everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is Heidi from My Reading Life, and I'm here today to film a book review for The Plant Messiah by Carlos Magdalena, Ventures in Search of the World's Rarest Species. This is the September pick for the Book Naturalists Book Club. So it's a short little book, and I was really pleased with this one. I love the cover, first of all. Let's just get that out of the way. It's just absolutely gorgeous. And Carlos Magdalena is a guy who is originally from Spain and who had a passion for plants, basically, and for rare plants in particular. And he did not have formal training in order to pursue this passion, but he just decided he was going to do something having to do with rare and endangered plants, and so he set out to make that happen. Before I get any further into this review, I just want to point out that this book was ghostwritten, and the only way that I knew that was another reader for the Book Naturalist Club pointed it out to me and said it was in the acknowledgments, which is at the end of the book. So the ghostwriter and collaborator for this project was Matthew Biggs. And I wish that had been on the front of the book, just so full disclosure, but that didn't mean that I didn't enjoy this book. So I just wanted to put it out there for full disclosure. So now that we have that out of the way, continuing on with the book itself, The Plant Messiah. So as I said, Carlos Magdalena was somebody who just had a passion for plants. He grew up in a poor family in northern Spain, and at some point in his life, he had tried a bunch of stuff. He had been a bartender. He'd done all these things, sort of businessman type oriented things, and just decided he was going to attempt to realize his dream. And in that way, this book actually reminded me a lot of An African in Greenland, of a young man who just decides he's going to pursue his passion and takes off from his home country to a place where he thinks he can realize those dreams. In this case, Carlos Magdalena travels to the UK and gets an internship at Kew. I think that's how you say it, KEW, which is a horticultural preservation type organization. And through this internship, Magdalena works his way up. He gets into a scholarly program, kind of like, it isn't college, but it's somewhat similar to that, where he learns how to propagate and grow and take care of all these different tropical and other endangered plants. And from that, he starts traveling around the world working for Kew. Or Kew. I'm not really sure how you say that. I probably should have looked that up. It's the Royal Botanic Gardens in UK. And so he starts traveling around the world, searching out rare and endangered species and bringing the seeds or cuttings home from those plants to the UK to try to propagate them and get them to grow and to figure out how they reproduce. I really enjoyed the plant stories in this book. I will say that the writing is a little bit choppy at times. It's definitely not poetic or anything like that. It's very serviceable language, but it does seem disjointed at times, and I assume that's because of the nature of how this book was written. But I do have a couple of just little anecdotes from this book to share, because that's what I found delightful about this, is the little different anecdotes and little different points that he's making about plant conservation and the species behind him. Here on page 37, he's talking about how you do science and how you're doing science when you're trying to protect endangered species. And he says, "But there's always science behind whatever you do. It is science, even if it is performed with dirty hands and not in sterile conditions." And that really spoke to me, because I work in the science field, and I certainly work in a part of the science field which is not, I'm not in a lab. I work in the field, and I never work under sterile conditions. I'm always filthy, and yet it is still science. It's science even if you don't have to wear a lab coat every day. And then he really is passionate about conservation and about protecting these species of plants. He says, "We can't just pick and choose which plants to conserve, keeping only the ones that provide medicines or look pretty in gardens. Destroy one species and you give yourself permission to destroy them all. We still know so little about what they are capable of. It's like finding a library where the books are written in Chinese and then taking someone to visit who can only read English and Spanish to decide which books are relevant." And I thought that was a really good point. Like, Just because we don't particularly know the importance of a species, whether that be plant or animal, doesn't give us the right to decide that they're worthless, or that they don't have a place in the world that is central to how everything works. We just don't know. And then he tells different stories about different particular plants that either were thought to be extinct and then one individual is found, or are new species to science that nobody's ever described before. He talks about how animals interact with plants, how they act as pollinators and distributors of seeds and pollen, and how sometimes interactions are happening that we don't understand, and in fact, we are causing damage in ways that we can't even imagine a lot of times. So he's talking about some plants on Mauritius, which is an island in the South Pacific. And this particular flower is only, or this particular plant is only pollinated by one species of gecko. But there's an ant that's been introduced to the island, which attacks the geckos. And so if a gecko visits a plant to feed and he gets attacked by ants, eventually he'll get driven off and he'll never come back to that plant again, and then the plant will never get pollinated. And so the ant is not dangerous to the plant itself, but it's dangerous to the plant's pollinator. And this ant was never indigenous to Mauritius. So, you know, that's the kind of damage that gets done by humans moving things all around the world. Introduced species are a particular danger to the flora and fauna of our world. Another just really neat story, he's talking about he's in Peru and he's been traveling around and he's been looking at a lot of different things, and he discovers an area where they're growing different kinds of cotton. And this is something I did not know. Maybe you knew it, but so I'll just read you what he says here. On another part of the plot, they were growing cotton, and the bolls, the seed capsules, had split open to reveal the fibers within in a host of different colors: mustard yellow, crimson, grayish pink, and tones of terracotta. I was used to seeing white commercial cottons and their wild darkish brown relatives, but from pre-Inca times, local cultures selected forms of cotton for their bright color. Who knew? I certainly did not know that cotton would grow in the wild in different colors. I thought it only came in the color that I've seen it in, which is modern white cotton. So I was just blown away by that. So there's just little things like that throughout this book, little stories about different plants that he discovers. He has a particular passion for water lilies. So like he goes around the whole world, different parts of the world, and tries to collect specimen of different rare water lilies, you know, everywhere from Australia to South America to these islands in the South Pacific. I mean, he just goes everywhere. And I just found that just delightful to read about. This book was just a very, it's like a warm hug of a book. It is not the most literary thing I've ever read, but it really just was a feel-good kind of a book. I liked Magdalena's message about the importance of conservation and why we should care about these plants' disappearance from the earth. And I'm really happy that I had read this book, and so pleased that we picked this one for the Book Naturalist Book Club. And so many things that I've read this year because of the Book Naturalist Book Club I never would have known about or picked up otherwise. And so I feel like I've gotten introduced to a lot of different topics and a lot of different people that I never would have read about. So that's always a plus. Anyway, this again is the September pick for the Book Naturalist Book Club. If this sounds interesting to you, I hope you will pick it up and try it. I hope you're all finding some great books to read, and I will talk to you later.